I want to teach you the fastest way to sabotage a TED Talk or any group presentation. I'm Dr. Dan, I'm a neurostrategist. I am inspired by God and passionate about the brain. I want to help you bring some reality and clarity to your communication. And in this video, we're talking about how to sabotage a TED Talk, how to screw up a group presentation, how when you're in front of one person or 1,000 people, how you can get it wrong, because there is a way to get it wrong, and I'm telling you, it has everything to do with the brain. Now, when I talk about sabotaging or screwing something up, I can speak very, very well to it because I've done it many times. And so this is a trial and error, and I didn't know what I didn't know before, and maybe you're sitting there, you don't know. Here's where I am. I'm an introvert. I'm very curious. I'm a little bit nerdy when it comes to understanding things, and I always feel like I need to prove it to people, that I need to prove my value, that I need to prove that I know what I'm talking about. And that can get into a lot of trouble, because when you come from that place, and if you're the same, or you end up spending a lot of your time talking about facts and data and logic and information, you will get into trouble quickly. The brain does not interpret that in a way that can help them be persuaded or to act or to change, or to be inspired. That's not what does it. So the way to sabotage your TED Talk or a group presentation is to talk about the facts, the data, and the logic. And when you do that, you trigger the skeptical parts of the brain. And nobody wants to do that. If I asked you right now, hey, when you're going to do a talk, what do you want them to get out of it? It wouldn't be, well, I kind of want them to be skeptical. I want them to be very thrown back a little bit, being challenged, resist me. No, that's not what we want. You want them to be relaxed, open-minded. You want them to do something. You start to believe differently, behave differently, have a level of trust, a likability, to start to know you, know that they can go get behind you, right? That's what we want with any audience. And so TED Talks are 18 minutes long. The key to a TED Talk is that you must not be talking about facts and data alone. The brain is wired to resist it. If you throw facts, it can only take so many of them before it resists it. In fact, it has been proven that when you throw up facts or data or logic or numbers, that it makes the parts of the brain that are skeptical in nature, that are very analytical driven, to be stimulated. And when you trigger those, you essentially have to have a perfect pitch or a perfect talk or overcome all the objections in their mind in order for you to get them on your side. And you see how hard that is? There's a magic sauce to avoiding that and to disarm the entire logical, skeptical system in the brain, and that is by doing this one thing. That one thing is telling more stories. You heard it here, that if you're going to do a TED Talk and you're going to do it well, or you're going to do any talk, any one-on-one or one-on-many, you need to learn to be a good storyteller. Now, I don't consider myself a good storyteller. I've learned how to tell stories, but I'll tell you this, a bad story beats facts and data every day of the week. So if you're going to sabotage your communication, whether it be a talk or a report or a one-on-one interaction, if you don't know how to tell stories and to utilize the facts are important. It's just that they need to be wrapped in story. They need to start and end with a story. That's what makes people remember. And so here's why it matters. Stories have been proven to help people act, pay, and remember. In fact, 2 times greater action comes from telling more stories. You get a 30x increase in the amount of value that you're portraying, right? A perceived value, which is an actual value because that's how much they're really willing to pay, 30x times more through research showing that when you use story, it increases your message by 30x time in your buyer's brain. And then thirdly, it's 22 times more memorable when it's wrapped in a story. You see the value here? Again, I'm already going through some of the data and facts as it relates to telling more stories. And it's important because you've got to know how your buyer's brain or your prospect or your audience's brain is wired so you can best communicate to it. So it reminds me of a story when I had a 4-hour health makeover I was doing for 200 people. And I kid you not, for 4 hours, I lit them up with more facts, data, proven statistics, you name it. And at the end of the talk, I had a call to action. And one of the calls to action was to buy supplements and make an appointment. And I can tell you right now, it was a less than 5% of the people did what I told them to do. And I'm thinking to myself, how come I just loaded them with all the proven stats as to why they needed to do this thing and take this supplement and make this action step and make this appointment, and yet less than 5% of the people did it. And as they reflected on it, and to be honest, I didn't even know at the time, the next 2 months after that, I was just thrown back. What is happening? I'm not good at this. Nobody listens. Nobody in my town wants to do this. But in reality, it was my own inability to communicate effectively. And I just killed them with facts and research and data. And what I really needed to do was bring them in with story. And so the next year when I did the same thing, I switched my approach. And I started with the story, I ended with the story, and I littered testimonies throughout the entire thing. And much to my surprise, I literally had a 50% increase, actually did what I told them to do, actually went and either made an appointment or bought supplements. And so it wasn't because of the data and facts. I'm telling you, you got to ask yourself that question. When you're giving talks or presentations or webinars or Zoom calls or even one-on-one reports, what are you using? Are you trying to kill them with facts and data and logic, which is increasing that skeptical part of the brain? Or are you bypassing the skepticism by utilizing the power of story? Because in a day and age when trust is at an all-time low and you're already dealing with the most informed, cautious, skeptical buyer of all time, I'm telling you, you have to be able to build that trust, and story does it. The other thing about the brain is, this brain, if you think about it in your head, it's only 2% of the body weight, right? It only makes up 2% of your entire body weight on average, but it requires 20% of your energy. This is why, if you remember back to taking tests, that you would get done with taking tests, whether it be an ACT test. I remember when I post-grad test that I had to pass these board exams that were all day long, all weekend long. I would get done with the end of a day and you're exhausted. You're like, I just sat in a desk and filled out bubbles, but I'm exhausted. Because the brain capacity, the energy requirements for your brain is high. So when you lead with more facts and data in a talk or a presentation, specifically even a TED Talk, it may be the best data and logic and facts and set of information known to man, but if you don't wrap it in story, you're going to be in trouble. It's the same thing with sermons, same thing with inspiring teachers and preachers and personal growth development seminars. Like, you can't just lose them in the facts and the data, because that brain is looking for ways to reserve energy, and the way it does that is by hearing a story. When you think about it, would you rather sit down and watch a 2-hour documentary on, Scottish history, or would you rather watch Braveheart, right? It's because Braveheart allows you to move the storyline and you remember it and you actually feel things more and you have emotion around it, which builds trust and makes you want to do something about it. So you start to see your TED Talk. The way you sabotage it is to eliminate stories or only tell one story. You need to litter it with stories. Now, it can't be all stories, but I would say on an average 20-minute talk, you're dealing with one major story and then 2 minor stories, at least 2 to 3 stories within a 20-minute presentation. Now you may ask, what story to tell? Well, there's a lot, and I'm not going to get into it on this particular video, but I will tell you this. You need to start with your own personal story. Simon Sinek said this: people don't buy what or how you do it, they buy the why first. They buy why you do what you do. So when you start with your own personal story, it allows people to understand why you do what you do, who you really are, and your motive behind it, which is probably a great motive. And a story allows that to be captured and them to feel that. Remember this: there's no story without conflict. Every great story must have conflict. Nobody wants to hear a story that I climbed Mount Everest and everything went great and I won. No, it's like, tell me you got, halfway up and you about died and then you end up winning, right? It's that conflict of the story. So you have a story and you need to talk about the conflict of your story. That's what brings people in. And I could prove it to you from a neurochemical standpoint and the hormones that are involved. But the bottom line is you need story. I created an impact story formula that allows anybody to plug their story in. And one major component is the test, right? You had an upbringing, you had a test, and then a search for answers. So search for a solution, which caused emotion, and it caused you to have uncertainty and doubt and skepticism. Then you overcame the end epiphany, which led to your triumph. And I have this formula that I take all of my clients through so that they can express that conflict and create the greatest storyline that has people on the edge of their seat saying, where can I sign up? What do you want me to do? And they know, like, and trust you so much that they're willing to do what you tell them to do. The more conflict you have and the more vulnerable you are with your conflict, the more universal your story becomes. Things that you may not want to say or may not feel comfortable, or you may feel a little vulnerable, those are the things, when you say them appropriately, are the things that become universal. You can take any audience and you're relating to them. Remember, people don't buy because they understand everything. They buy because they feel understood, and nothing will help them do that like a story can. 2 more quick bonuses on how to not sabotage your TED Talk or group presentation. The one is that you need to use more visuals. So we always teach, don't tell them when you can show them, right? To the decision-making brain, visual stimuli will go there 10 times faster. So if your objective is to get them to understand you, build trust with you, and know what to do next, then you want to use as much visual stimuli as you can. In fact, I had a speaking coach one time that I hired, great guy, was a good coach, but he had me believe that I should drop my PowerPoint and not use any more slides. And I tried that for a time or two, and it flopped. It just did not. And I remember thinking, man, if I'm in the audience, I like visual stimuli. I like watching a video. I like slides. I like images. I like to be able to follow along. And he's like, no, PowerPoint's dead. And I'm like, I just disagree. And then I put it back in, and sure enough, my results took off again. And then now, knowing the neuroscience, your visual capabilities distort every other sense. So vision is so powerful. Now, the key is to have more images than text, right? Less writing and more images and more video, or at least a good amount of videos, and you can capture things more even through story. But the point is, don't tell them when you can show them. And the other bonus is having more vocal variety. And this flies in the face of a lot of teaching out there. They'll say, hey, practice your talk 500 times or 50 times or even 10 times. And I'm gonna tell you, that's another thing I had a speaking coach tell me to do. And I told him, like, when I do this, I feel like it sounds weird, but the more I feel rehearsed and prepared, the worse it gets. And it turns out, when you are so well rehearsed, you lose your vocal variety. And the greatest TED Talks, by the way, the greatest TED Talks had 3 key components when they looked at the research. Number 1 was more hand gestures. What does that mean? You're more passionate about your message. Number 2 is more vocal variety, which is increased tone. Your voice goes up and down because you believe it, because you sense their emotion and your emotion, and you're able to blend that. That's good vocal variety. That's going to add to your ability to persuade and inspire people. And the third one was smiling more in that research. And so more vocal variety, how do you do that is make sure you own your message, but not have it memorized. So more stories, more visuals, and more vocal variety. So there you have it. How to not sabotage your talks is to use the power of story. I'll say this, using story is not a way to communicate, it is the way to communicate. We've been doing it since the history of mankind, and I'm telling you, it is your single greatest ingredient, the greatest technology you ever do, because of how the brain is wired to communicate and get your message to millions. Hey, if you like this content, you like this video, do me a favor, click that like button. That'll get me exposed to more people, and more importantly, it will get me fired up to make more of it. And hey, if you have a specific topic you want me to cover, put it in the comments. I will cover it as it relates to the brain and productivity and making sure you can reach more people. There you have it. Dr. Dan out.